Chapter 1. The Missouri Gentleman. Thomas Woodford Woody Baker was born on March 25, 1895, in Texas County, Missouri. His father, Charles Pierce Baker, came to Missouri from Culpeper County, Virginia, in 1856. His mother, Emily C. Bray Baker, came to Missouri from Randolph County, North Carolina, in 1861. They were married in Texas County, Missouri, on February 3, 1876. Woody was the eighth of 11 children. His father was a farmer and a carpenter. He attended Grandview School and graduated from the 8th grade. He worked on the farm with his father, and as a young man, worked in the hayfields in Kansas during the summer. He had a heart attack and died on August 21, 1953, while driving down Old Highway 66. Martha Marilda Rilda Johnson Baker was born on September 24, 1892, in Greene County, Missouri. Her father was Joseph Curtis Jackson Johnson, who was a lifelong resident of Greene County near Ash Grove, Missouri. Her mother was Alberta Jane Daniel Johnson, who came to Greene County, Missouri from Kansas as a small child. They were married on July 30, 1885, and lived to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. Rilda was the oldest of 6 sisters. The first baby girl died in infancy, and one brother died at age 14. Her father was a veterinarian and part-time constable. She attended Kelly School and graduated from the 8th grade. As a young girl, she worked as a telephone operator at Walnut Grove, Missouri, which is approximately 8 to 10 miles from her home in Ash Grove. She had a heart attack and died on April 14, 1964, in St. John's Hospital in Springfield. Woody and Rilda lived in the same area near Ash Grove. They met at a party and were married on September 22, 1915. Norman D. Buddy Baker was born on January 4, 1918, and Noreen Baker on January 7, 1922. Noreen was to be named Martha Jane after her mother and grandmother. His mother read to Buddy often, and on one occasion read about a girl named Noreen who was very special, so he began calling his little sister Noreen. Buddy stated, "My mom was a little overweight when I was in school in Springfield. Later, she trimmed down to be a very slim person. I inherited most of my traits from my mom. She was very organized, frugal, a perfectionist, and an ahead-thinking mindset. My dad was a heavy-set jokester, carefree and more freewheeling with as few worries as possible." Soon after Noreen was born, Woody and Rilda moved to Springfield, Missouri. Woody's first job was in the parts department for the International Harvester Company. As an outside person, he could not stand the confinement and took a job as a salesman for the Davis Candy Company, where he traveled a large territory selling candy wholesale for several years. He was offered a job as a route salesman for Willow Springs Creamery, which later became Borden's and subsequently Piley's Creamery. His first route was retailing to homes, when milk came in glass bottles. Little Buddy worked with him at one point. Bud cut off his finger on his left hand one time, Noreen explains. He was taking some milk bottles up to a home, and a utility company had taken out something similar to a telephone pole, and someone had covered it with grass. Bud stepped in that hole, and of course there were rocks around it, and the rocks broke the glass, and it cut right across the knuckle on the third finger of his left hand. They were a block away from Burge Hospital, so Dad took him over to have it sewed on, and it didn't seem to give him any problems after that. Later, Woody had a wholesale route to businesses and grocery stores. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Baptist and had one brother, Dewey, who was a Baptist minister. Woody enjoyed singing in the church choir, although he did not read music. He enjoyed taking part in school plays since he and Rilda were both active in the PTA, Parent-Teacher Association, when Buddy and Noreen were in elementary school. He had few culinary talents. His only one was popping popcorn, which the children would enjoy nightly. Mother was more reserved than Dad, recalls Noreen, probably because of having asthma all of her life. She was an excellent seamstress and made all of our clothes until we were big kids. She was an excellent cook, in those days using lard, butter, and cream, and always had cookies and goodies when we came home from school. She enjoyed many kinds of handiwork, including tatting, crocheting, knitting, embroidery, and she also made hairpin lace. She was always available to work at the polls on election day, too. She was a Sunday school teacher and also a Baptist. She played the piano for her own enjoyment and had previously played for church. She was great at making birthday cakes. Our home was a simple, pleasant, loving home. Our lives were centered around our home, school, and church. Dad provided for our family. We had plenty of food and clothes and a warm home. Mother was always at home to greet us with a big hug when we arrived home from school. Buddy recalled. My folks were great for each other because of their very different personalities. My dad was a very outgoing type of person. He enjoyed the outdoors with hunting and fishing trips, ball games, gardening, singing in the church choir, and visiting family. He was a very carefree soul. My mother was just the opposite, a proud lady who loved being at home, loved tatting, quilting, flowers, church, and all the more sedate things. She played piano for the church services. She took care of all the family business, taxes, mortgages, etc. Noreen and I had a great family relationship within our home. Since Buddy was 4 years older than me, says Noreen, he contracted all of the childhood diseases, measles, mumps, chickenpox, and brought them home from school so that I had them all before I even started school. Buddy started piano lessons at age 4 when their next-door neighbor, a piano teacher, began teaching the prodigy simple exercises. Buddy could read notes before he could read words. Luckily for him, there was already a piano in the house since his mother enjoyed playing, though he learned more from their neighbor than his mother. Buddy moved to the trumpet at age 11. Buddy and Noreen attended Berry Elementary School, Pipkin Junior High School, and Senior High School, now Central High School. The family was active in the Robertson Avenue Baptist Church where Buddy was baptized on April 14, 1929, and where Woody was a deacon. Buddy's Boy Scout Troop No. 9 was sponsored by the church. As a young man, he played the trumpet in the church orchestra, as well as in the Boy Scout band and the school band at Pipkin Junior High. He had studied trumpet under Southwest Missouri State musician Winston Lines, who ended up studying under Buddy years later in California, when the composer and arranger was working for Disney. Longtime Springfield friend Jim Jameson recalled Buddy's great ear for music. Sitting in the balcony of Denton's drugstore at South and McDaniel, he was amazing. It just took him a few minutes and Buddy would complete a whole arrangement without ever going near a piano. I could read music before I could read English, Buddy explained. No, I wasn't a prodigy. I had music around all the time. Everything sort of revolved around the church. After school, work, practicing music lessons, and dinner, says Noreen, we would listen to our favorite radio programs, play games, work jigsaw puzzles, or read. Then it was popcorn time. Bud always liked cars. He progressed through toy cars, Tinker Toys, marbles, red wagons, baseball with the neighborhood kids on the dead-end street, bicycles, and taking care of Coke, his Shetland pony, which he won by collecting Coca-Cola bottle caps. His first car was a Model A Ford with a rumble seat. He later had a LaSalle, a classy red Dodge, an MG which he drove from California to Missouri, and many other cars to follow. There was always an attitude of caring between Buddy and Noreen. When she was very young, he always had her by the hand everywhere they went. That same love permeated through their adult lives as long as their parents lived, and continued until Buddy's last day. We shall always be grateful for our wonderful childhood, states Noreen, which was built on family and love. Going to school, I had a lot of friends, said Buddy. It was a normal childhood. We didn't move around a lot. I went to grade school for 6 years, then on to junior high school for the next 3 years, then on into high school. In grade school, there wasn't much music to do. I studied piano when I was 4, and I got into classical music. But I got to thinking, for boys, playing piano was sort of a sissy thing to do. I had a cousin who was a good trumpet player, and he talked to me about playing trumpet. So I finally got a trumpet, took lessons on it, and became a trumpet player. I didn't play piano professionally at all. I was a pretty good trumpet player, but I'd say that I was a lousy piano player because I didn't follow through on it. My parents were very supportive in music. After I got into music, especially after I started studying trumpet, they were glad when I stopped practicing, to stop all the noise in the house, I think. I used to sell the Saturday Evening Post, Ladies' Home Journal, and Country Gentleman on a weekly basis. I used the money to buy a new bicycle, music scores, and manuscript paper, and any other thing that I might have wanted that was within my budget. During those Depression years, I tried to keep from adding an extra expense to my dad's tight budget. I also did a few unusual things during the summer months, such as mowing the lawn for some neighbors, parking cars in the front lawn along a parade route when the circus came to town. There were other creative ideas that came along from time to time. I did these things through necessity rather than by desire. When Buddy was a 16-year-old junior in senior high school, he drew a pencil sketch of President Roosevelt and sent it to him as a birthday present. It was one of many presidential sketches the young man drew for his teacher, Ms. Bissett, who 6 months previously had begun her lesson plan on Lincoln. Buddy was inspired enough to attempt portraits of all the presidents, saving Roosevelt for the delivery before his January 30th birthday. From Lincoln to Coolidge, the sketches, minus Roosevelt, hung on the classroom wall with pride. On February 18, 1934, the Springfield paper ran an article about the event. The president had sent a thank you letter in return. Buddy received it on February 17th. Buddy had no formal art training, but the newspaper called his work promising, as indeed it was. Up until a year previously, he had done nothing but lettering, but at that time began comic sketches which led to portraits. With Ms. Bissett's encouragement and the presidential acknowledgement, Buddy found himself seriously considering a career in art. He immediately announced his intentions for taking an art class in his senior year of high school, then enrolling in the Kansas City Art School. "It was a decision for me when I was younger," Buddy said, "whether I wanted to stay with the art world or really get into music. I decided on music because the lifespan on music is usually longer than art. Charlotte once in a while says, 'Why don't you draw anymore? Do some painting.' I just sort of lost interest in it." Even in those early years, Buddy lived for music. Another reason he switched to trumpet by the time he entered Pipkin Junior High was that he wanted to be in the school band and enjoy some of the trips they took. He knew it would never be possible to lug a piano around, so, since he could already read music, he just had to learn how to blow that horn. He studied under E.W. Peters for a few years, soon learning the rudiments of theory and harmony. Around 1932, Buddy joined the famed Queen City Boy Scout Band. One of Buddy's favorite outings was when the Scouts took a trip to the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. I was in the largest Boy Scout band in the world, conducted by an old Scotsman called Richie Robertson. It was a 110-piece band. Big band, and a good band, because at that time they were grading on primary, intermediate, and then concert band levels. Concert was the large one, but you had to go through the other two bands to be eligible to play in the big bands. We played concerts all over the place: St. Louis, Kansas City, Iowa, Illinois, all over. I was a Boy Scout. I got up to first class, but that was about it. I think a lot of that was because I was good enough to be in the big band, the major band, and that helped. I was never into all that physical stuff that much, camping out, roughing it. I joined for the band. I'm camping out when I have to turn the blanket down to medium. We were always in band and orchestra contests. Usually we came out pretty much on top in all that. I got up to first trumpet. I was in the group of firsts, and there were a lot of trumpets, 20 or 25. The Boy Scout band was all brass. In the orchestra I was playing second trumpet all the time. There we had 3 or 4 trumpets. Apart from the Boy Scouts, I was in both the band and orchestra, about 60 pieces in high school. That band was conducted by Richie Robertson's son, James, who eventually became the conductor of the Springfield Symphony. After I got out of high school, I went into college and studied music there, theory and composition. In high school, I'd already gotten a handle on writing high school-type arrangements, and I formed a little dance band. We got a job playing at a restaurant every Sunday. Dinner music. It was a 12 or 14-piece band playing popular music of the day, early to mid-30s. Usually we played ballads or jazz music. Buddy graduated from Springfield High School in 1935. Being pretty good at baseball, art, and music, his choice of career at this time was becoming difficult. He continued his education at Drury College and Southwest Bible College in Bolivar. When I went to Southwest Baptist, where I received my Doctor of Music degree, I studied orchestration along with theory and composition. I did a lot of studying on my own, too. After I did all that schooling, I immediately got a job with one of the local radio stations because at that time it seemed like every radio station had a little band. KWTO. It's still there. With TV now, too. It was a popular band. We played a morning show and sometimes in the evenings. Usually they were half-hour shows, about 8 or 9 pieces of music. I played trumpet in the band and started writing for them, too. He even toured as a professional trumpeter with several territory bands, traveling the Midwest region. This led to full-time road work as an arranger, keeping orchestrations fresh for both audiences and the performers. From there, he was asked to arrange music for other bands in the area and bands passing through, always on the lookout for able orchestrators. I had the help of my parents through college. They were supportive, but I don't know how proud they were because at that time, people didn't think much of professional musicians because it wasn't a substantial life. But they never objected to it. It was a daily job, didn't pay much. I was still living at home, and the money I made wasn't enough to support anyone, even in those days. But it was a good experience. It was at this point that Buddy developed his own system of constructing harmony, an element which always fascinated him. This intriguing system interested the great Nadia Bollinger, teacher of Elmer Bernstein, Aaron Copland, and Quincy Jones. It was a polychordal system in which every tonic chord had its own scale. He came up with it by studying what Stravinsky did. Prokofiev also used this system. I began using my arranging skills full blast through a contact in Springfield, a fellow I was studying arranging with privately. His name was Paul Mitchell. He was formerly the piano player with a Tommy Dorsey orchestra, and I met Joe Haynes, who put together Rudy Vallee's orchestra and got Tommy Dorsey's band together. Paul and Joe were both from Springfield. So through those fellows, I met other big band players. All the big bands at that time came through Springfield, and I got to know a lot of the players. It was through those connections that I started making arrangements. They would suggest, "Gee, this kid is doing some pretty good things. Why don't you give him a shot at something?" And that came about a number of times. I did the full arrangements, and the big bands usually had a copyist who would make the parts. I did some of the parts at the radio station because we didn't have a copyist. I wasn't really paid well. Back then, if you got $25 or $30 for an arrangement, that was a whole lot for a pop song. Usually, they wanted a record length, around 3 minutes on those.